There we go.
Perfect. All right. So thank you all for coming to our what's one of two chapter meetings this month for the South Florida chapter. So we've got one today, and then a little bit later we'll give you some more information on the one we have coming up later this month. So this is one of two, but we're really excited for today's topic, which is on one of the newer products within the suite of UiPath tools. So looking forward to seeing some new technology from UiPath. If you're able to and you want to join us on video, we appreciate that. So we're not just looking at ourselves on here, but we do have a demo planned as well. So promise you won't be looking at all of us too long. You'll be seeing a demo of the product shortly. We're going to get started with introductions for those of you that might be new to our chapter. And we'll introduce today's guest, which is Dhruv Patel from UiPath. He's going to be our expert talking about the communications mining tool. So if you were with us a few weeks ago, we talked about document understanding. And now we're going to go into some of the newer technology of extracting data from unstructured type communications. And so Dhruv is going to show us how to do that with communications mining. And then, like I said, later this month, we've got another chapter meeting, and that one will be talking about the latest release of UiPath and all the great new features that are coming out with the current product release for coming out in May. So stay tuned for that. As always, I am Courtney Dominguez, and with me is my partner in crime, Tracy Dixon. We lead the South Florida chapter, and behind the scenes, you'll see we've got Jansen and Diana Gray. They are always helping us, keeping us organized and on task. So thank you very much to them. We're lucky to have a group of us that run this chapter. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Our LinkedIn contact information is here, and we will be distributing that. We'll be distributing this information at the end of the session. So even if you're not able to join us today, you'll have the content, and also the recording will be distributed as well. And with that, we're going to welcome Dhruv Patel. He's a senior sales solution architect with UiPath. He's been with UiPath for over 2 years now, and he is an expert at all things communication mining. So we're really lucky to have him with us today so that he can walk through some of this new technology and show us how we can put it to use. So thank you, Dhruv. We appreciate you being here. His contact information via LinkedIn is also here. So if you have any follow-up questions for him later, you can always find him on LinkedIn. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And Dhruv, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, you can take it
Perfect.
away.
Yep. Thank you, Courtney. Let me. All right. I think this is. Oh, there we go. All right. Perfect. Should be able to see the slides. Or is it still sharing? Oh, hang on.
Right now we're seeing the
The infinite loop
Ah,
of
entire screen. All right. There we go. Yeah. It's a little bit different than Zoom, just a little bit, just
it
enough.
is. There you go.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, great. So today we'll dive into communications mining. Really, this is going to be the capability of the business automation platform that's going to allow you to really understand the communications that are happening in and around your organization, right? Really, there's a lot of data that's moving around. You could think of emails, chats, IT service tickets, really any kind of communication. It could even be customer service type situations where there's messages going back and forth. People are asking for certain things or requesting certain actions to be taken. And so really understanding what that technology is or what that communication is that's happening in and around your organization can be really key to finding efficiencies and just overall improving how you're communicating out and communicating within your organization. And so that's really where communications mining comes into play. It can really help you not only understand from an analytics perspective what's happening in and around your organization, but also take action on it, right? And so today we'll cover a little bit about, how do you actually get started with communications mining, and then how do you actually use it within in automation or within some of the processes that you're looking to automate. Now, at a high level, some of the benefits of communications mining, right? It's no code, low code. Really anybody can use the tool, help really slice and dice and understand what the communications are that are happening in and around the organization. It's using a large language model. We may have heard a lot about AI and machine learning lately, right? GPT, all these things. And so that similar technology, those large language models are being used in communications mining to actually help with tagging and understanding from an AI and machine learning perspective, those communications that are happening in and around your organization. It's fully customizable. There's a lot of accuracy and even ways you can kind of toggle thresholds and things like that around accuracy to help with interpreting those messages. It's quick to train, right? You can upload a lot of data to the tool, but just train a small subset. And there's even some unsupervised learning capabilities within the platform that'll help kind of suggest new ways to train or label or to kind of configure your communications mining solution. Now, because it's also part of the platform, it's going to be easy to integrate, right? You can integrate directly through APIs, both for some of these pre-built scenarios that we'll cover in later slides, as well as, there's connectors that are going to be there for your workflows and your automations to directly kick off and take action on some of the communications that are coming into your organization. Now, if you look at a high level, kind of the steps for communications mining, it's going to be one, connect, right? So take that source system or that source data, it could be emails, tickets, service test tickets, right? CRM notes, and get that into the communications mining platform. Once you have the data in, the next step is really to interpret it, right? So you set up that connection, you want to train, the data, train the model on the data that you've just ingested, discover, the different scenarios, categorizations, labels that are coming out through your communications and the different clusters. And then from that, build off automation connections so that you can kick off relevant actions based on certain things that are uncovered within your training and discovery. And then finally, right, that leads to drive, right? You could drive RPA, automations through the UiPath platform. And then you could drive direct integrations with things like CRMs, APIs, or ERP systems. The list kind of goes on and on to what you can trigger downstream. To get into a little bit more depth about how this interpret piece works, right? You're going to really ingest and store that data. So connecting the data through APIs or through some of the direct integrations into the communications mining platform then gives the machine learning models access to that data and allows them to actually interpret and uncover, with unsupervised learning, where there might be certain categorizations or clusters that you could take advantage of. The next step is really to do that discover and training. So you're going to have the models train on the data based on some of the labeling that you've assisted with. You'll validate and analyze the results, report and deploy. And then finally, this iterative process where it says retrain and reinfer, a little knock to the old name of the platform, which is now communications mining. But really, the principle stays the same, right? Once you've deployed this once, you can then, over time, as messages and communications come into your organization and continue to evolve, over the years, over the seasons, you're going to be able to adapt your model over time to those changes and those changing needs, right? And so once you have that set up, again, the next step is leading into drive, right? Kicking off those automations or deploying the results through an API.
Hey, Dhruv, can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah, of course.
So that implies that this could be used separately if you can deploy through an API, or is the API then intended to be used by RPA?
So the API is open. You can connect to it as long as you set it up. If there is a way or a reason you want that direct integration, you could do that. Now, one scenario that might be helpful in is if you want additional, more customizable type dashboarding, but you'll see there's a lot of customized dashboards that are just inherent in the communications mining platform. Right now, we use those APIs directly within mainly the automation workflows to kick off automations downstream, because oftentimes you want to actually take the data, take the tags, and actually do something downstream. And that's really where the process automation comes into play.
Got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So to get an example of how this interpretation is done, we can take a look at a sample IT service desk ticket for this scenario. So in this kind of use case, right, we're interpreting this message that was sent to the IT department. Somebody lost their access to Microsoft Office. They might need some additional guidance or just some support on resolving this issue. And so what you see on the left is the message data that's coming into the communications mining platform. And on the right is what's being extracted by the communications mining tool, right? So you'll see a couple of things. One, it's going to recognize that this is a request and it's a quality of service request. You can see that there's some additional tags on there. It's a system issue that was recognized. There's a license expiry. It's pulled out certain entity information, right? That could be key for downstream processing, like the employee number and what the software or technology is that is needing this license expiration request. In this case, Microsoft Office. And then you can see that it's gotten some more sentiment type information to it, right? That it's an urgent message and that they're chasing, right? Meaning this is, them saying this is the second time I've raised a ticket. They're kind of chasing for a follow-up or for a resolution. So this is just hopefully giving you a better understanding of the insights that the model is actually able to extract. And then these same insights are what you're going to be able to use downstream within those automations or within those processes. Now, the information in these labels, it's really coming out of some of that training, right? So you're going to have a lot of data that you upload to the tool, but you only have to label a small subset. And the unsupervised learning behind communications mining is actually going to take that and extrapolate it out across, the data set. And then that is then used as kind of training to interpret any new messages that are coming in so that it can extract this type of information. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of how this actually works without getting too deep on the technical aspects from kind of a data science perspective, and still helping you understand how the AI and machine learning aspects work. Now, when we think of use cases, right, I mentioned a couple by emails, chats, IT service desk. But if we really kind of take a step back and look at it from an industry perspective, you can see that there's a lot of use cases for this type of unstructured communications data processing across different areas. And these are just some areas that we've seen as applicable areas for communications mining. And we've had some customers use some of these in some of their use cases. But again, there's many more examples across different industries and different domains, even within departments within these industries where communications mining can be applicable. Awesome. So now we'll get into a little bit more of a demo. So what I'm going to do is go through an ITSM triaging demo. You'll see a couple of things in this scenario. So one, you'll see how communications mining can be used to actually interpret and understand and basically tag different communications that are coming in. In this case, it's going to be IT ticket requests. You'll also get to see, before we dive into the studio version of that, you'll see what does it look like to look at the communications mining tool, to do some of the labeling, and to really get that set up from more of an administrative perspective. And then we'll actually walk through step by step to see how you can leverage communications mining within your automations. Now, as a little kind of Easter egg or additional treat, we're putting in a GPT type model to help with responding back to some of these IT tickets. So really, this is not just an example of communications mining, but a way to do multi-model type automations where you're bringing multiple AI and machine learning models together to really achieve an end-to-end process seamlessly, right? So we're bringing in our communications mining model as well as a text generation model that you can bring in to help with some of that email generation. Awesome. So with that, let me end this slideshow and let me pull up. There we go. Okay. Perfect. So this is the communications mining platform. This is really where you'll do some of the data analysis, some of the dashboarding, some of the labeling, and really just setting up the model so that you can start using the predictions and get quality predictions out of it. You'll see kind of at the top hand here, there's different tabs or different parts of this communications mining environment that you may want to interact with. Right on this first tab, the train tab, it's going to actually give you some guidance on how to train your data set, right? So when you upload your data set, and again, that could be through a CSV file, through APIs, even through JSON, or there are some direct connections to certain things like Salesforce or emails, with more to come that we're working on. But once you have that data connection set up, you can go to this tab and it'll actually guide you through, based on the data, based on the labeling that you've done, the steps that you have to complete to actually get some results from the data. Now, the first step generally is to upload a taxonomy if you want, right? And taxonomy means if you have some preset labels that you want to go and start off with, you can go ahead and upload a taxonomy or a definition of those labels ahead of time. But that's optional, right? You can also have that uncovered as you're going and reviewing what we call our clusters. And when we talk about clusters, what we're talking about here is really the model itself, through an unsupervised manner, will try to group together common messages or verbatims or communications that it ingested or finds in the data, right? So any patterns that it kind of identifies, it's going to try to group them together in clusters and present them to you to try to basically label and provide and build that taxonomy over time. These clusters are a smaller subset of the larger data set. So really, you only have to label a small subset of the data that you do upload so that the model can actually interpret and learn and understand what you're trying to label, how you're labeling it, and then use its technology on the rest of the data set. So that first step, right, of reviewing the clusters would be this Discover tab. Now, this is a blank project. I have another one that we'll jump into that is a little bit more kind of pre-done. But to get a sense of that clustering, right? If we've uploaded, let's say, this data set for the first time, you can see it's talking about a swimming pool, probably at some hotel or spa. You can see that these types of messages have come in and it's clustered them into a couple groups, right? So we have a few different groups here of different kinds of messages. You can see that this first one has some similarities to it. They're talking about the spa and pool facilities. There might be some commonalities about the size of the pool, right? You could see tiny, small. So it was able to kind of glean together some information, some interpretation of the language, and actually make these clusters. Now, to just get a sense of what I mean by clusters, if we go to, let's say, the second cluster, right, we can see that this group of messages that was in the same data set actually has a slightly different kind of tone to it, right, or different type of commonality to it. In this case, it's talking more about payments. It's talking about bank accounts, deposits, different things like that aren't necessarily related to that pool scenario that we saw in the initial cluster, but in and of itself might be another cluster that you have to actually interpret and may encounter from a communications perspective. So to go back to this first cluster, let's say we wanted to add that label. We could go ahead and click this plus button. We can go ahead and start adding a label to kind of identify what exactly these communications or this type of communication is referring to. So maybe we want to type in pool, right? And we can give it, a happy or sad kind of tone to it if we wanted to. We can go ahead and just kind of leave it as is, right? And so if we hit enter, you can see that it's listed here in kind of our label set. And if we wanted to, add additional labels to the individual communications themselves, we could also do it here as well. What's nice about the tone is, you can add some kind of more of a sense of sentiment to the actual tickets themselves, or to the actual, in this case, communications themselves, so that you provide more context, right, that you can then use in your downstream automations. You can also do levels to these taggings as well. So if we want to say pool, we want to say, maybe we say pool again, and we can add another layer to it and say small, right, and then provide a sad face. So now you can see we have kind of a stacked sense of the labels. So not only is it a pool label, but it's also a negative sentiment around the pools, around these communications actually being small. And so if we wanted to, we could go in, add additional, more specific labels for these individual communications, but this entire cluster is going to be grouped with these specific labels that we just created. Awesome. All right, so I've done, some of this discovery already for another scenario here. This one more related to the actual IT help desk type situation or example that we had referred to earlier. And so once you have your discovery actually done, maybe you've done some of that labeling, the model is trained and updated. If you go back to that training tab here, in terms of your guidance that is going to give you. So this guided label training, you can see that it's now a little bit different, right? It's giving us a model rating based on some of the labels that we've done, some of the verbatims, or verbatims just means communications that are within here, as well as how many were reviewed, right? All that information is being kind of brought together to give you this score. And this is just from, over time, how we've interpreted, training this model and our experience with it. We kind of package it up as like an easy guide for users when they're trying to train their model, to help them understand, what makes a good model and what might require more training, more interpretation, or more labeling. Now, in addition to that, to give it, you some more assistance and some more guides, it's going to give you different tasks here that you can go through to actually make some more review adjustments to your training data and to your labels to actually improve this model rating or model score. So if you wanted to interact with any of these and actually, take action, you can really just click it, and it's going to take you to those specific communications or those specific actions that it's asking you to do. And you can go ahead and do your reviews, make some adjustments to the labels, and that'll then translate into the actual training and improvement of the model over time. Awesome. So once you have, your model trained, you've done your discovery on the clusters, these clusters will continue to update over time, right? As new data is coming in, the model itself will start to suggest additional clusters for you to go in and label. So you can always, kind of make this an iterative, continuous reinfer type use case or type approach to actually training and improving your model on the communications that it's seeing. So this is kind of a way for it to suggest specific groupings of similar communications. Now, if you wanted to explore the data set, there's a couple of ways to do that. So one, you can see all the data here for, those different verbatims or communications that are coming in. You can do different filterings around, dates and, different types of labels that you have on the actual communications. And you can also see some of the metadata or additional information that you have around these communications, right? So these labels are coming out of your data set and what the model is taking from the trainings you provided it in that discovery section, and actually applying it to your data set so you can go through, make additional adjustments if you need to, or just even take a look at your data. The validation tab. Now, this is very similar to that training or that guided training tab. Again, it's going to provide you with some health information around your model, around some of the metrics and some of the performance of the actual model based on your labeling. I won't go too deep into this, but we have some guides that I can provide on how exactly this works, what are some of the guides and principles. And of course, if you have access to communications mining, you can hover over any of these areas and it'll dive deeper into what exactly this is telling you when it gives you a score of excellent on your labels or average on your underperforming labels or your balance. But really, the main point here is it's a way to actually improve how you're training your model and get some high quality results from the actual interpretation of your communications. Now, lastly, there is reporting capabilities built in as well, right? So I mentioned reporting a little bit earlier. Within the communications mining platform, you can basically build your own custom dashboards using some of the reporting that we already have in these other tabs. So this dashboard tab allows you to basically pull in different charts from these label summary, trends, segments, threads, and comparison tables into your own customized dashboard view, so that you can really make a more tailored kind of experience, one-stop kind of shop to review your communications. Now you can go into these other tabs and get some more information, right? So here you can see there's a label summary tab. So we can really dive into our communications and see kind of from a tree map perspective, what are the communications happening in and out of our organization? Are we getting a lot of hardware requests, access management? And how does this change over time, right? So you can do different things to filter by dates, but you can also see things like trends, right? So if you wanted to kind of understand these labels in more kind of an over time type view, there's different dashboards here to allow you to do those trend analysis and really to just understand the communications that are happening in and around your organization. Are there any questions on kind of what I've showed so far, at least at a high level?
Drew, question on the dashboard. So, like, for instance, if you're getting, maybe I'm using this, this is an example in an IT space, right? And then I'm using it maybe, say, on, like, I think the other example that you were showing was on, like, hotel charges. So those are kind of two different, is you would filter it out. Is that how you do it? So you could see the report separately, right? I don't want to mix my IT support questions with my hotel questions. Those are two different things if I want to see the analysis on those. So you're able to separate those out from a dashboarding perspective.
Yeah, so you would actually do different projects for those
Gotcha.
and have your data go to different projects. That's the best way to just keep it separate.
Separate.
You could create a high level filter, but probably best practice is to just have them separate for those separate use cases.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That makes sense. Because you're going to train them differently. So that makes sense.
You'll have different labels, and you never know if like labels sound similar, but they're totally different, right? Like if we think of IT help desk or hotel, and you think of access management, one might be like a key card for your room, but the other one's for your software. So you don't want to get those things as crossed, if that makes sense.
Yep, that definitely makes sense.
And one other thing too I'll show is, as you're kind of going through these dashboards and wanting to really dive in, it's all interactive. So you can really dive in and get a better sense of like, what are some of those deeper level tags that are on these different communications, right? And again, this all comes out of that taxonomy or that labeling that you've done in that Discover pillar, which is, again, a small subset, a couple hundred of the, few thousand communications that are actually within the total data set. So you only have to do a little bit of labeling, and the model will kind of take it from there and apply it to all of the data, and then give you some suggestions in that train guide section on, how could you improve it, or what might you want to do to improve those results.
Is there any kind of guidance on like volume? So, is there, obviously the more you train, I would assume the better it will recognize, but is there any kind of guidance on or recommended amount that you should use to train the model?
Yeah, so we recommend 10,000 communication samples. Now, what that means is, like, if you have an email, it's one verbatim or one message within a thread, right? Within an email thread or one email itself. Or if you're talking about, let's say survey data, right? It's the response to one question of a survey type thing. And when we say 10,000, it's not that you're labeling all 10,000. You'll only label a small subset, but 10,000 samples gives it a good sense of, or a good amount of data for the model to do its unsupervised learning and clustering and suggest, when you're on these Discover sections, suggest clusters for you to go in and label.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would say it's scenario dependent too. I'm sure there are some exceptions depending on the exact scenario itself, right? Different things, but that's our general kind of rule of thumb.
So through the ideal scenario, it like to provide with the say if we are exploring something on the email side, so 10,000 different emails that needs to be provided to train the model.
Yeah, it's not the technical limit, but it's our recommended amount. There is a smaller technical minimum, but I would kind of recommend talking to the communications mining team before trying to do less than that. Okay. But if you're just doing if you're just kind of testing it out, right, communications mining, you could probably play around with smaller data sets just to see, how does this work? How does it actually work from a dashboarding perspective? But when you go towards production, you'll want to have that larger data set so you have more information for the model to work with. Right. Awesome. All right. And so to access this communications mining information, there's actually API connections that we create or can set up to call to the model once you've trained it. So you'll have your model kind of trained and listed here under this models tab. The stream section. So really this is where if you wanted to have automatic kind of kickoff of automations, right? The real kind of approach to doing this from a production standpoint is going to be setting it up with streams that directly feed into the UiPath orchestrator, right? So to give you just kind of an example, in the demo, you'll see it's going to be more of a demo version, right? Or just to try it out. So I'll make direct calls to the communications mining model for predictions. But when you actually go into production, it'll be more of this type of setup, right? Where you have those email communications coming in directly to communications mining through one of the connections that you set up. Those communications will then come into what we call as a stream that you set up, which is directly connected to the UiPath orchestrator through a queue feeder. And that'll kick off specific automations or send the communication to human in the loop for additional processing and then sending information back to do some retraining for communications mining. So just wanted to quickly give you a little bit of a glimpse into this so that you had a bit of an understanding of what does this look like in production.
And for anybody that might be on an on-prem version of UiPath, or how are the connections for that?
So right now, communications mining is cloud only, I believe. There might be some exceptions to that. So I'll follow up in the when I provide the deck on what kind of options there are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Dhruv, like this one which you showed, it is where the output of the communication mining is being consumed in the RPA. But like as you were mentioning earlier, right? It can be consumed as an API also. Say if I want to use in some other system through an API. So
Yeah, and so I can give you a little bit of a glimpse. That's actually I'm calling to it right now in the demo. I call to it
okay,
through
okay,
an API. So I'll walk through this just to give you a sense of that API in this process ticket section. Here's where I'm actually making that API call to communications mining. Now we're going to come out with more dedicated activities for Studio, but in this demo it was kind of just created with our HTTP activities. And then there's just some adjustments to the message that you actually send, right? That payload. So we do some configurations, the string that's coming in or the text that's coming in from the ITSM ticket. We'll do some additional adjustments to it so that it's ready for that JSON payload. And then we send it across to communications mining, receive back the actual prediction, and then we take care of some of those downstream processes. So in that same vein that you're referring to, you could set this up to connect to somewhere else with an API as well.
okay.
And so just to re-review the kind of steps that we're going to go through in this, right? So you'll see, I'll show you some tickets that, let's say we got added into ServiceNow. They're going to be new tickets that we want to interpret with an automation and have it handle responding or handling those tickets, right? And so you'll see within the automation that we go out to ServiceNow, we grab those tickets, we send them to communications mining to get an understanding of what that ticket's asking for, right? Its labels, what are some key entities from it. And then, we have the option to actually triage it or handle it on our own. In this case, you'll see that I'll have the automation handle it and actually provide a response back using, an Outlook email that it can send, as well as update the actual ServiceNow system. So this is kind of a demo of how you could potentially use the solution to handle, ITSM type triaging. Awesome. And so if let me bring over my ServiceNow example, right? In this ServiceNow instance, we have 3 tickets here that have just been submitted, right? So we have an example here of somebody who, they're locked out of their Salesforce account. They need a password reset. We've got, maybe another one here they've gotten some hardware issues with their keyboard and laptop. And then we even have, a third one. This time they have some firewall access issues, right? So we'll see, when you have multiple tickets, how could you potentially grab those tickets and have communications mining handle triaging them for you? So again, this would be running, off in the background using more of that structure that I showed earlier with those queue triggers. But for demo purposes, we'll kick it off from here. So I'll go ahead and hit run. Now, the first step it's going to do is actually do some initializations, right? You see this init box here. This is really just setting up some of the variables, setting up some of the JSON schemas, those types of things that you'll need to make some of the downstream API calls. Now, the next step is to actually get those ServiceNow records, right? So those 3 ServiceNow records, we want to make an API call to ServiceNow and grab them, or it could be any ITSM ticketing system that you're using. So I'll kind of go step by step. We're actually using integration service to handle the actual call itself, right? So you can see I'm using an integration service scope. I'm going to go ahead and grab all those records. Great, so that's complete. And so once we've done that, we can see here in this variable that I'm actually storing them in a table that we can go through, right? So I exported those 3 tickets that you saw that were in ServiceNow into the actual automation. So now it's a local variable. And now we'll iterate through each one. So the first one we'll actually iterate through is going to be that Salesforce password reset issue, right? I can't log into my Salesforce account. Can someone help me reset the password? So let's see how communications mining interprets it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. What you'll see is we're going to take that ticket and we're going to go through this process ticket step. And then we'll go all the way through actually taking an action on the ticket based on how it was labeled. So I'll go ahead and hit continue. You can see that the prediction, so it made its prediction from communications mining and it predicted it as access management. Now we can actually see an output of that here. So if you look at the events, I actually logged the response that communication mining model gave us from the ticket information that we sent it. You can see that it was able to label it as an access management issue. Not only did it label it as an access management issue, but it also went kind of a level lower to existing account, and then even a level below that to can't log in. So we can see that the communications mining model was able to interpret this as, hey, a ticket that is coming in where somebody needs a password reset, right? They can't log into their account. And so from this, because we've been able to identify the categorization of it, we could take this information and go ahead and do some downstream additional tasks with it, right? So before we do that too, the other thing I'll point out is it was able to also grab some entity information. So because we said Salesforce in the actual body of the ticket itself, based on the training, this was actually able to pull out the entity Salesforce. So you can see here that the application name entity was recognized as Salesforce. So if we wanted to make a more tailored response based on the types of systems that we have, we could leverage that entity information to do just that within the automation. So if we continue on, right, we have those labels for the ticket from communications mining. The next step is to now actually do the relevant action. In this case, I put in a switch activity, and basically I just took a look at the actual label for what this ticket is, right? It could have been access management, could just be a general application. This ticket could have been a database related one, hardware bug, etc. But based on that label, I'll go to that specific case within this switch argument and take the relevant action. Now in this case, right, it was access management issue, so we're going to go down that path of events. Now what I want to do is actually provide a response. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, another AI machine learning model, in this case a generative AI model, to do that response for us. Now the benefit here is that instead of maintaining a bunch of templates for responding back to certain tickets, we can actually just use that generative model to do the response for us and pass it the information both from communications mining as well as some of the original information to allow it to provide a tailored response back to the user, right, or to the submitter of the ticket. So if I hit step into, you can see again, we're going to go ahead and make some more API calls. We're going to respond to that IT ticket sender. Here's where, again, we make the OpenAI API call. If you weren't part of the AI Summit, we actually have a dedicated activity to do this now as well, but I had made this before that, so we're just making a general API call. And so once it responds, we can see here in the message too, this is the email response that it provided. So based on that tagged information that we extracted from the communications mining, or using communications mining from the ticket plus the ticket body, we're able to get a quality response back to the user that was generated without us having to maintain a template, right? You can see that it kind of humanizes a little bit more and gives it a more tailored response, specifically for Salesforce and resetting their password. So if we continue on, again, we can go use Outlook can go ahead and actually send that email back using the email that was part of the ITSM ticket. And then finally, if we wanted to go back into ServiceNow and update the actual ticket with that information, we could go ahead and do that here as well. So I just completed that, updating ServiceNow activity. And now if we actually go back into ServiceNow, we can see that I updated the status from new to customer action. I also added in specifically the comment from communications mining saying, hey, provided email instructions to the ticket sender. And then even based on that categorization, I was able to update the type from blank to access management. So hopefully this gives you a good sense of how you can leverage communications mining to really help solve some of those communications needs. In this case, it was an ITSM example, but you could take this same one and again, apply it to really a whole host of use cases, like some of the ones that we see here across these different industries, domains, and business units.
Every IT help desk would be very happy to have that response back with the resetting the password.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could think of customer service too, right? When you're just responding to some of those low-hanging fruit emails or contact us responses that you get. It's a great way to really help cut out some of that manual effort of those small responses.
Any other questions for Dhruv on anything that he's gone through or anything that we haven't touched on with the technology?
How this will be useful in terms of chat, basically?
Yeah, so with chat, you could make calls to the prediction model. So if you needed additional tagging or additional kind of natural language processing capabilities, you could use communications mining to interpret some of the messages that are being sent within chat. The other method too is if you have those chatbots that are then kicking off automations downstream, communications mining can be used within that process to provide a more specific and more exact response or action as a result. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility into how you can respond to things and take action based on the asks within a chat.
Okay, so it would be more specific for the chatbot. Like, just I'm hypothetical thinking. Like, can this be also leverage in the teams? Like, can you integrate with the teams and all? Like,
I'll check if we have a direct integration. If you can connect it through the API, you could have those connections. Now it might have to be through an automation, but I'll check what our integration capabilities are for communications mining directly. I
okay.
don't think there's anything that we have built up just yet, but it could come because kind of as the next steps we're working on is integrating integration service with communications mining. Now, there's no timeline set for that, but it is kind of on the roadmap, and that might have some additional connector capabilities.
Okay. And in terms of costing and also how the costing would be in order to use the communication mining platform and all?
Yeah, so it's actually AI units is the costing for communications mining. So if you have AI units today and you're in the cloud, you should be able to actually enable communications mining. And then
Okay.
there's specific costs around per message, per data, like what's the actual AI unit cost. I would check with your account teams to know the exact price points, but it is an AI unit based service.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dhruv? As we mentioned, we'll have the content sent out, and the demo that he went through this is all recorded, so this will all be sent out as well. So in case you did not see some of the earlier content, we'll be sure to get it out to everybody.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Dhruv. This was like a fantastic presentation. I did miss out like the first two parts because of my audio issues, but I would definitely take a look at the recording for sure.
Yeah, and what I'll do as well is I actually did a similar deep dive with Tom. Maybe you guys have met Tom Goldowski, but he's one of the Reinfer guys as well, and we did a dev dive on the same topic. So I'll include the dev dive link to the recording as well, where it goes into this, maybe even in a little bit more detail. But we walk through this as well. So hopefully that can be complementary to the video you saw today. They asked some other questions too, as well, that you might find helpful in that video.
That sounds perfect. Thank you so much, Dhruv.
Yeah, of course.
Dhruv, thank you again for being with us today. We really appreciate it. I think the demo is awesome. And I think there's so many ways that you can use this technology. So it's going to be transformative for a lot of those scenarios where you get that unstructured data that, right now a person is interpreting. But yeah, we'll be able to hopefully leverage bots to do that and extract the data. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Happy to. And thanks for having me. Of course, if any other topic that comes to mind down the road, let me know.
Thank you so much. And as a friendly reminder, I mentioned this in the beginning. We've got our next event scheduled for May 23rd. So if you haven't already registered for that, be sure to do so. We're going to be highlighting the latest release features that are coming out this week. So I've read some of the preview on that, and some of the new features that are coming out are going to be really great. And I know very transformative as well. So looking forward to discussing those features in our next event scheduled for May 23rd. So if you haven't already registered, please do so. And that'll be it. So thank you again, Dhruv, for joining us. Thank you, everybody else, for being here. And we look forward to doing this again in 2 weeks at the end of the month. So have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.